Call the East Lyme Board of Selectmen regular meeting of October 16th to order. If you all could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There is an additional agenda item we want to add on to the meeting this evening with your approval.
I'll move to add an agenda item to be heard before all business, which is an update on the public safety complex.
And where is that going?
Just prior to old business.
So is that going to be 1F?
1F, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roseanne.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. Be nice to get that in the record. Any consent item additions? No. So
No.
delegations. Anyone like to speak? Delegations? Mrs. Cheeseman?
Thank you. Good evening, Holly Cheeseman, 16 Mitchell Drive, Niantic, appearing tonight as State Representative, 37th District. I realized it had been a while since I'd been here, so I'd give you a brief update on a number of items. On the legislative front, we're still waiting to hear about a possible special session. There are a number of items that require our attention. We are required to vote on the legal settlement for the hospital lawsuit. The state agreed to pay approximately $150 million to settle that lawsuit. That requires legislative approval. There was a bill regarding restaurant minimum wage and tipped wages. There was a public hearing. The governor vetoed the bill. The bill actually passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate. The governor vetoed it because he felt it might have been unconstitutional because it would have retroactively banned class action lawsuits. The public hearing was last week. I think over 100 restaurateurs turned out. Basically, they've been relying on Department of Labor guidance that said, as a general rule, you can assign 80%, if a server, 80% of their work is serving tables and approximately 20% is non-service work, you could allocate the wages accordingly. When you're serving tables, you can be paid the tipped wage, and the restaurateur is required to ensure that your tips then amount to the minimum wage. For other work, folding napkins, filling salt cellars, that sort of thing, you are required to be paid the full minimum wage. So there is a bill. I think it has support, but as I said, we have not yet been called in to vote on it. As you will be well aware, there's a significant amount of bonding still outstanding, things like Town Aid Road, et cetera, that has not been voted on. I gather the majority party and the governor are about $100 million apart. I suspect the governor is holding that bonding. No, I won't say holding it hostage because that's not very polite. But the governor would like to see a vote on his $18 billion transportation plan. I think this is version number 3, possibly. This would span 10 years, would require some amount of tolling. It would access federal funds that are available at a very low interest rate. Yet again, we have yet to see the details. So we could go in next week. We could be dealing with this when the regular session starts again in February. I genuinely have no idea. So that's it on the legislative front. I attended the meeting of the Southeast Connecticut Council of Governments this morning, and they presented their bike walk plan. And I would urge anyone who's interested, this takes an overview of the area and looks at ways to improve safe access for walkers and bikers. They are inviting public comment until the 20th of October. So it's bikewalksect.com, and you can find the draft plan there. I will be hosting a Business Advisory Council meeting here on October 29th from 8 to 9 a.m. That is open to all business owners in East Lyme and Salem, and to be honest, any business owners. And I will be presenting information on a number of new laws that took effect October 1st, including the new minimum wage requirements, paid family and medical leave, new requirements for sexual harassment training, and a number of other items that affect business owners who employ one person or more. So, October 29th, 8 to 9 a.m. And finally, I have yet to set a date, but I will also be hosting, in conjunction with certainly East Lyme schools and I hope Salem schools, an informational forum on vaping. As you know, this has been much in the news, and I will be bringing in superintendent, principals, local resources that are available, explaining exactly what it is and the dangers and what we can do to confront it. So as soon as I have a date and a time and a venue, I will let everyone know. And I thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Holly.
Anyone else? Mike?
Evening, Mark, folks of the Board of Selectmen. This ordinance that, for the Police Commission, is that going to then supersede the document that's in our charter on page 37, ordinance providing, let's see, designated first selectman as town agent?
That was,
It's just wondering if
That's
this
already
is going
come
to,
out,
Mike, never mind, we can't respond.
I know you can't
respond
respond, but
That's already done away with, I believe.
okay, it just seems like it's still in here, because the reason I'm bringing this up, because in New York, there was a rogue police department that developed. It took a long time to get it, and it started from the chief of police on down. And this new document that you put out here answers to me the question as to who the chief of police is going to answer to. And that's pretty critical. My only concern with it is that none of this, the answer to, is an elected official. It just seems to be a commission. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, we'll move forward into our meeting. The consent, the approval of the minutes first, the regular meeting of October 2nd. That was our last meeting.
I'll move to approve the regular meeting minutes of October 2nd, 2019 as submitted.
Second?
Motion and second. Any corrections, comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Consent calendar, please.
Move to approve the consent calendar for the meeting of October 16th, 2019 in the amount of $1,757.15.
Second?
It's been seconded. Any comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Terrific. We had added an item onto our agenda this evening for an update on the public safety building. What I'm going to do here, because I was asked by IT to stop and then start again. Okay, so I've asked, in a conversation with our architect, one of the principals, Bill Silver, he volunteered to come this evening to try to set the record straight and to give us an update. There's been a lot of chatter on social media, and the Day has picked up an editorial this morning. So I think it was important. Thank you for being so invested in the project as a principal of a big firm. I appreciate you coming down here this evening and helping us out. So, Mr. Silver.
My name is Bill Silver. I'm the principal with Silver Petroselli and Associates, architects, interior engineers, and interior designers based in Hamden, but also in New London. In our 28 years, we've probably completed over 200 emergency service facilities, much like yours. And so we bring, obviously, the committee recognized that when they engaged our firm to conduct a multi-phase process for the project. Certainly the first phases that we dove right into quickly, because we knew the project was on a tight timeline, was the needs assessment and conceptual design. The committee had done a very good job of programming the project, and so we had a pretty good roadmap, but we went into the building without any influence from the committee and the commission, and we did a thorough study of the building. We knew right from the very start, and it was clearly communicated in the RFP and in a brief scoping meeting with the subcommittee, that the budget was $1.7 million, and we're going to meet $1.7 million. Part of an A&E's responsibility in these studies, in these programs, is not just to give you the limited information of what there is to meet your budget, but to show you the big picture, to give you a sense of what the total responsibilities in the long run are going to be involved with any building project. And so just to truncate our services and say, it's a $5 million project is irresponsible. And that was not our intent when we came to meet with you. When we were surprised when we came to the meeting that we thought it was going to be our first meeting with the committee. We had not even yet met with the committee, and so we were surprised that it was a public forum, and so that is our error. For showing the big picture so prematurely, to a process normally works with a committee or a commission in multiple meetings. And I can almost assure you that we'd have 10 meetings of preliminary planning where the committee and the architect and the engineers all work together to scope a project to, one, meet the programmatic needs, but also to meet the budget. We hadn't had that meeting yet. And so therefore we were surprised and probably should have guarded our remarks, although I made the point during the latter part of the presentation that these were big picture elements that would be serve the facility for the next 20 years or more. So part of our responsibility is to show that larger scale and the broader scope of the project, and then work with the committee to establish priorities, meet the program needs, and more importantly, meet the budget, and we are still going to do that. We are in such early stages. So far, you've only received about 10 pages of information, which are those preliminary budget information, again, without the benefit of the commission steering us and helping us with those priorities. Those pages list sometimes up to 4 separate priorities of the needs of the building, and those priorities are long distance, long range down the road, some of them, while most of the phase 1 priorities for the $1.7 million budget are delivering the adequate space that the police department deserves. You've made a wise selection in choosing a building, a Class A building that is well built. And we barely have had a chance to say that, except to say that, to confirm that it is a building that will serve this town for years to come and serve not just the police department, but the other space that is available within it. Our goal is to get the police department, the EOC, the fire marshal, dispatch, all under one roof in adequate space that will serve them for the next 20 years plus. And we are confident that we are doing that now that we are in this first phase of working with the committee on a process. And it's a process that will take 18 months or more. So to condense our overview report into a misconstrued reporting is unfair. Unfair to the committee that hadn't even had a chance to review that information, and unfair to us that hadn't yet really had our first meeting with the committee, and there are many more to go on this process. It is a functional plan that the police and the police commission and the planning committee have developed, and we are confident that we will make it work within the building and within your budget. We just need the time to work through the process, and responsible planning needs and deserves time working together to establish those priorities, and especially for architects to respond to the committee's needs to meet a budget. We're aware of the 1.7. We are confident that we will meet that budget, and we will probably add alternates within it to enable the town to do more should the budgets come in even better. So to give you a sense, you barely have a few pages. Truly the document that will result at the end of this conceptual and schematic design phase is this thick. It is a volume of planning, a reporting of the minutes and the decisions that are made, and we haven't even started that yet. So forgive us architects for bringing the bigger picture to that public forum. It really is meant as a planning tool to begin with that committee. And so I think I've said enough. And
I think you have. And I know our chairman of the Vision Committee is here too, and he wanted to clear the record. But Mr. Silver, I'd like to say that you kind of fell on your sword a little bit, that you didn't know what you were coming into. And frankly, we didn't. I think members of the Vision Committee didn't realize how the process worked either. And I think, and to be truthful, I think we misfired, miscommunicated. We weren't sure what to expect. And then when we got what you delivered, our jaws dropped and said, well, and I think it was reported that way. But thank you for setting the record straight that we're, I want to say first base. We're on first base, but we might not even have gotten to first base yet, based on what you've described tonight. That we have a long way to go in talking about how to reach that 1.7. Why we're saying 1.7 is there are added costs into the communications facility. We've got to bring a lot of wires into that building for
Correct.
Communications,
Correct.
and that's separate from the architectural design, right?
Correct. It
Okay.
is.
If you'd stay there, we also might have some questions for you, but Mr. Daigle, you're chair of the commission.
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate that this was the first in many, many steps. We're only at the concept phase right now. We did, following the presentation, continued our meeting, the full commission. I tasked the committee members to go look at the material that was presented and be prepared to have a follow-up meeting. In that follow-up meeting, we did look at what was provided. We did draw some conclusions on what was a must-have, what was a nice-to-have, and what was a want. And we followed that up with a few of our committee members this past Monday, meeting with representatives from Silver and Petrocelli, and we have reached some agreement on some things that don't necessarily need to be done or have to be done. For example, the original concept had the police department split between the first and second level with the EOC and the fire marshal's office on the first floor. We've asked the architect and the project manager to look at bringing the police department more fully onto the first floor and putting those other functions on the second floor. That should result in some cost savings from the egress requirements that were caused by putting functions on the top floor with a segregated boundary, because the police department has to have a segregated boundary from the other functions, both the planned functions and any future functions. So in that meeting, the representatives from Mr. Silver's organization and the representatives from the Vision Committee, I think, are both very confident that we will achieve a design that will serve the purpose and functionality of the organizations we want to put into this public safety building, and we'll be able to do it at budget. We have a ways to go.
Yes, we do.
All right, and there'll be give and takes. Will we have a locker room that'll serve future growth of 50%? Well, maybe. It may only be 25% future growth as we look. We're off to look at positioning the functions in the existing configuration to the maximum extent possible. There are going to be some configuration change. We have to have bathrooms and showers and things that are required to support. We don't, and those type things, but will need to be done. But we're off to maximize the use of the current structure, the fully satisfactory structure, to meet the functionality needs of the departments we're putting in there. Our Vision Committee is well representative of various organizations in town: Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, Police Commission, ad hoc members of the public, and it is our responsibility to identify a concept and bring a final schematic design before this panel that gives us a functioning public safety building at budget. If at any time during this iterative process that there is something that's identified that may cause us to exceed that budget, we have to identify that and assess how we're going to handle it. But that is not our goal. Our goal is to come in at or under budget. And at this time, I feel with a very high level of confidence, we'll be able to achieve that by working together as a committee and with Silver Petroselli.
For the record, one more time, because I love to hear it when it comes out of your mouth, how confident are you that we'll design this building at budget?
Very confident. We've never left an EMS, emergency service project, idle or still. We always find ways, and that's why the committee chose us, because of
We
our
know.
effective, efficient design process.
We vetted you out, and we know your former projects, and we appreciate working with you. Sir, it's a bad night of storms, and I appreciate you doing this. This is kind of a little extra over and above, and we do appreciate it because there's been a whole lot of
Right.
chatter.
Perhaps in closing, I guess I should say, in our 28 years of doing this, we have never had our first meeting and first broad-scale reporting of a total
Yeah, I
picture
know.
so misconstrued.
Okay.
And deflating the energy of your team, and we encourage you as a town, stick with it, work through the process,
Yeah.
let the process work.
I much appreciate that. I'm going to ask if any selectmen, I mean, you've been very thorough. Again, we're in early stages, but is there any questions that you might have?
I have a comment,
A comment, Mary?
and I understand the process of coming in under budget, but I think that the public has a right to know what they're not going to get for the money that was budgeted, what's being eliminated, so that we aren't nickeled and dimed to death over the next 20 years trying to make up for what we didn't do in the first place, when it would have been cheaper to do it, when it was under construction. And so I'm assuming that there are going to be additional public forums where the public can be well-informed and weigh in. Having lived through the high school expansion, which was underbid to begin with, 20 years later, we're still trying to make up for what wasn't there in the first place, which should have been there. A building that opened without enough classrooms for every teacher to have their room, floating teachers. These are things that over 20 years we haven't been able to compensate for. And I don't want that to happen with this building. So those
Terrific.
are my comments.
Right. It's always been our intention for 1.7 to renovate the building. That was the initial cost before we went to referendum. It's an office building now, and really the police functions and the EEO, the fire marshal's office, and the dispatch is a little bit more technical, and that's why it's separated out. But we're really, a police function is office building. And then there's also the Sally Port and the lockup scenario, but that was already cut out of the budget. Let's keep in mind that even though this board agreed to a $6 million price tag, the Board of Finance cut out the holding cells. They cut out a major police function. I think my vision is the vision committee would come back to through the appropriations process and say and ask, should we put in that $1 million for holding cells? That is going to be treated as a separate phase 2, if you will. Could be done at the same time. We are going to be pricing that out with the architects. But what we promised the taxpayers is putting the police functions of the office work functions in that building along with the other 3 departments. And then the other functions would come at a separate price tag, and the vision committee will put that together.
Yeah, I'd like to add that we made it very clear in the scope of work that we are going to get a design for the Sally Port and retention cells. We will put in, once that design's complete with the rest of the building, that'll be a bid-all package, that when we go out for a bid, we will get a hard construction cost for the Sally Port and cells. At that time, along with a hard cost for renovation of the building, at that time, the Vision Committee will make a recommendation to this board on what we should or shouldn't do. As far as when, obviously doing it up front could save some money, vice waiting for phase 2 a year or 2, but we'll at least have a quantifiable number for that option, and we and the townspeople will be able to make a conscious decision on whether they should be put in at this time or wait until a further date to do so.
And based on facts and based on price specifics, which we weren't able to do when we were going out to buy the building. So we did do this process backwards. We told the public about it, they overwhelmingly approved it, and so did you folks. Any other questions or
But
comments?
the Board of Finance did put out the caveat that
To come back.
we could come back and ask for the $1 million that they took out.
Yes.
And I think we need to keep that in mind in order to get a complete project that we don't try to make up for what we didn't get in the first place.
Sure.
there's no question we'll be coming back to say, does this make sense to through the appropriations process, whether that means another referendum or not is to be determined. But what we were authorized to spend, we can spend, and that will be sufficient enough to do what initially we were authorized to do, which is just move the police to another facility.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Silver, for coming out tonight.
My pleasure.
Much appreciated.
Did you want to recognize also Mr. Price?
Say that again.
Did you want to also recognize Mr. Price?
Mr. Price is here. Mr. Price is the chairman of the Police Commission. We might ask him to come up in more of an ex officio during the Police Commission ordinance conversation coming up next. Again, thank you, Mr. Silver. Drive safely. We have down for the public that might be watching over, we have down trees and down wires already in this storm. So we're out and about. Our emergency crews are. I know that our Region 4 Department of Homeland Security Emergency Services have warned us that this is coming. Eversource has got extra crews on tonight as well. There's a big storm. And the leaves are still on the trees, so there's a little bit of concern for that. So please be careful when you're driving home tonight, too. Discussion, Police Commission ordinance. Mr. Price is here, to maybe we can call him up to ask any questions, and thank you for being here, Mr. Price. We talked about this before. I was able to have the attorneys draft the ordinance. It's in your packet. It's in mine too. There it is. The 32.16 is where the meat of the difference is. If you have the, do you have what I have?
Yes, we do.
Yes, the 32.12 composition. What we're suggesting is in January, when members of the Police Commission, some of them will be coming up for reappointment or new appointments, that will be the time to take the first selectman off the board and appoint 4 persons instead of 3 persons to the Police Commission. Everything else would stay virtually the same. Members of the Police Commission may serve no more than 2 consecutive terms. That's always been in there. And C, no member of the Board of Police Commissioners can hold any other elective or appointed office within the town. And of course, that would include the first selectman in this case. So I don't know. What we'd like to do is schedule a public hearing on this. To the point, did you want to speak to the point of, Mr. Schultz had a point. Do you want to just come up and introduce yourself? Maybe you could talk about why we're suggesting to do this, Dan. Dan, sorry. Mr. Price, I know you're not used to that. You hurt your, you say you hurt your knee playing basketball?
Yes, I did. I'm not 30 anymore. Dan Price, 205 Upper Patagonia Road.
Few of us are anymore, to be honest.
East Lyme. I am here as the chairman of the Police Commission. When we set the Police Commission up, we set this ordinance up, and it seemed like a good idea to have the first selectman on the commission as a